Hi, I'm Mark, and today I want to talk about the reactions on the arrests during the coronation. I mentioned them in another video already. Because the police arrested 52 people during the coronation in London, and given the crowds of onlookers, that sounds like a quiet day. But who the officials took into custody caused resentment. Civil rights activists and politicians have sharply criticized the crackdown by the London police on opponents of the monarchy at the coronation celebrations for King Charles III. MP Richard Bergen from the opposition Labour Party was deeply concerned, and his party colleague Zara Sultana emphasized, whatever you think of the monarchy, the right to peaceful protest is fundamental to democracy. On Sunday night, the head of the anti-monarchy group Republics, Graham Smith, was released from police custody after around 16 hours. The organization said his cell phone was confiscated, and Smith spoke of a direct attack on democracy on Sunday. He doesn't know if he faces a penalty, and London Mayor Sadiq Khan asked the police for clarity. Government officials called the police operation balanced, but after his release, Smith wrote on Twitter, "Let's not fool ourselves, there is no longer a right to peaceful protest in the UK." He has often been told that the monarch is there to defend their freedoms, and he says, now our liberties are being attacked in his name. The organization Human Rights Watch had already criticized on Saturday that the incredibly alarming arrests were more likely to be expected in Moscow than in London. According to their own statements, the London police arrested a total of 52 people on Saturday, among other things for riots, violation of public order, and disturbance of the peace. The British government recently tightened the right to demonstrate. For example, police officers can stop rallies if they fear serious disruption. Chief of Operations Karen Findlay defended the approach as proportionate. I mentioned her already in the last video. She confirmed the right to peaceful protest. At the same time, Findlay emphasized that the police must intervene if demonstrations could cause serious disruption. It depends on the context. The coronation is an event of a generation, and that is an important aspect of our assessment, she said. So, if it's this justification was sharply criticized, and rightfully, as I said. And Labour member Jess Phillips said, the nation and their king are not so vulnerable that they cannot take harmless protests with different views. On Saturday, people in several British cities held peaceful protests against the coronation of King Charles III. Hundreds of people gathered in London not far from the procession route. There were also protests in the Welsh capital Cardiff and the Scottish city of Glasgow. And fans of the home team whistled the British anthem at Liverpool's FC's Premier League game against Brentford. But at least the rain had tradition. After all, the heavens have regularly opened at British coronations for more than 120 years. And despite the bad weather on Saturday, the royal spectacle unfolded smoothly according to plan in 3 acts: the coronation, the procession, and the balcony scene that delighted the crowds. The Mail reported that around 2 million people had gathered around Westminster Abbey and along the procession route and on the magnificent Mall Boulevard in front of Buckingham Palace. They had been promised the greatest show on earth, and the royal house delivered there. The ceremony is almost 1,000 years old, and Charles III is the 40th monarch to be crowned at Westminster Abbey. The focus was on an act that was not visible to the audience, the anointing with holy oil. Screens were draped around Charles, and then the Archbishop of Canterbury anointed the monarch's hands, chest, and head with holy oil. According to Justin Welby, head of the Anglican Church, this is a private moment between the new king and the King of Kings. Following the Old Testament model, Charles received his authority directly from God, and then his crown from the Archbishop. It couldn't be more archaic and anachronistic, and that's what some observers may have thought. Of course, efforts were made to enrich the ceremony with modernizing elements. For the first time, female religious dignitaries took part, and all world religions were represented. Among the guests in the abbey were not only heads of state, aristocrats, and celebrities, but also many ordinary people who had rendered outstanding service through their voluntary work. And a black gospel choir delighted the audience. And the Bible passage was read by Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who is a practicing Hindu. With this, as usual, magnificent staging of the royal family and its cheering subjects, Great Britain once again demonstrated a soft power around the world that less royal nations envy, and the kingdom tries to project the image of a diverse, tolerant, and multicultural society. But that's only true in a few places. The Indian press dubbed the British government headquarters Browning Street because among the holders of the 4 major offices of state, there's only one white man, and that's the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Jeremy Hunt. And very few in the kingdom are bothered by it. No wonder that the political magazine Spectator proclaimed Britain one of the world's most successful multi-denominational and multi-ethnic societies, but only if you have tons of money, I say. But because that's a picture with blemishes. At the coronation ceremonies, police arrested dozens of peaceful anti-monarchists on flimsy pretexts. That's what I started the video with. And it relied on a recently passed law restricting the right to demonstrate. And for young people, that doesn't go together. They see a monarch whose commitment to inclusion, environmental protection, diversity, sustainability, tolerance, and climate protection is undeniable, but they cannot get excited about him. For them, the 74-year-old king stands more for tradition and establishment, for conservatism, and for the fact that nothing really changes. Because of his age alone, as the posters read, he is not my king. But that was their point of view about this. But that's really something that really doesn't go together. And yes, King Charles is doing, in his appearances, a lot for multi-ethnical society, for different religions to come together, and so on and so on. But the government that contains so many people with minority backgrounds, ethnic minority backgrounds, but they are behaving like an kind of southern United States all-white band. That's what their policies are. If I look at this, well, I would expect this in I don't want to insult any state now with people from that state in the United States, but let's say I personally would expect this in a very certain U.S. state to come as laws what we see in the last years in the UK, and that from people with migrant background, and that is something that really doesn't go together. On the outside, it is showing all this multi-ethnic society, all this tolerance, and so on and so on. But on the inside, there's a growing, I would have to call it cancer from within the political establishment that is destroying this. And the younger people, especially in the UK, don't want to stand this. They made a mistake by not voting when they had the chance to vote to prevent a lot of bad things for the UK that happened in the last decade. But they have the chance to change this for the future. But it's on them to do it. And if they don't take it into their own hands by voting, for example, and getting informed about what they are doing with a vote, this will go a path I really don't know if I want to see the end of it. But nevertheless, it will be better someday. I'm sure of that. And I'll see you in my next video. I'll be back.